Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As you know, tonight is Christmas Eve, and I thank you all for taking time out of your holiday to hear our drama of Charles Dickens' classic, A Christmas Carol. Dickens said of this delightful little tale that he was endeavoring to raise the ghost of an idea, and it is our sincerest attempt to continue in Dickens' tradition and keep this ghost of an idea in each of your minds this holiday season and hopefully the remainder of your lives. And now, without further ado, we present you with Charles Dickens' masterpiece, A Christmas Carol.
Marley was dead, to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good on any document he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was dead as a doornail. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of this tale I am going to relate. Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name, that it stood years afterward. Scrooge and Marley. Sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge, and sometimes Marley. But he answered to both names. It was all the same to him. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted, hand at the grindstone was Scrooge, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel ever struck generous fire. The cold within him froze his old features, shriveled his cheeks, nipped his pointy nose, made his thin lips blue, and he spoke out shrewdly in a grating voice. Nobody ever stopped him in the street to say, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No children asked him what it was o'clock. Not a soul in all London drew near him. But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked, to edge his way along the crowded path of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance. Once upon a time, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting house. The door of Scrooge's counting house was left open, so that he might keep his eye upon his clerk, who, in a dismal little cell beyond, a sort of tank, was busy copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it almost looked like one coal, but he could not replenish it, for the moment the clerk came in with the shovel, the master would deem it necessary for them to part.
Merry Christmas, Uncle. God save you.
The voice belonged to Scrooge's nephew, Fred, who came upon him so quickly that this was the first intimation Scrooge had of his approach. Bah! Humbug!
Christmas a humbug, Uncle? Surely you don't mean that.
I do. Merry Christmas. Out upon Merry Christmas. What right have you to be merry? You're poor enough.
What right have you to be dismal? You're rich enough.
Humbug. If I could work my will, every idiot going about with Merry Christmas on his lips would be boiled in his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart.
Uncle.
Nephew, keep Christmas in your way and leave me to keep it in mine.
Keep it, but you don't keep it.
Let me leave it alone, then. Much good it may do you. Much good it has ever done you.
There are many things from which I might have derived good by which I have not profited, I dare say, Christmas among the rest. But I am sure I have always thought of Christmas when it comes around as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time, the only time I know of in the long calendar of the year, when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely, and to think of other people as if they really were fellow travelers to the grave, and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good and will do me good, and I say God bless it.
You're a powerful speaker, sir. I wonder that you don't go into Parliament.
Come, Uncle, don't be angry. Dine with us tomorrow.
I'll see you in hell first.
Why?
Why did you marry against my wishes?
Because I fell in love.
Love? Oh, dear. That's the only thing sillier than a Merry Christmas. Good afternoon.
I ask nothing of you. I want nothing from you. Why can't we be friends?
Good afternoon.
I'm sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute, but I shall wish my Merry Christmas humor to the last. Merry Christmas, Uncle.
Good afternoon, sir. The nephew left without an angry word, and upon his exit stopped to bestow loud greetings of the season upon the clerk, who, cold though he was warmer than Scrooge, for he returned them cordially. Now the clerk, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let 2 other people in. They were portly gentlemen, pleasant to behold, and they stood with their hats off and bowed to Scrooge.
Scrooge and Marley, we have the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley.
Mr. Marley's been dead these 7 years.
We have no doubt that his generosity is well represented by his surviving partner.
At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than necessary that those of us with the means should make some slight provisions for the poor and the destitute.
Are there no workhouses?
There are, sir.
And are there no prisons?
Plenty of prisons, sir. Yet I could wish I say there were not.
Oh, wonderful. For a moment I feared something had forced these institutions to stop their useful operations. Good day, sirs.
I don't think you understand. A few of us are endeavoring to raise for the poor some food and drinks and means of warmth. What may I put you down for?
Nothing.
You wish to remain anonymous?
I wish to be left alone. I don't make merry myself on Christmas, and I cannot afford to make idle people merry. My taxes support the establishments I have mentioned, and those who are badly off must go there.
But many can't go there.
And many would rather die.
Well, if they would rather die, they had better do so and decrease the surplus population. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Seeing clearly that it was useless to pursue their point further, the gentlemen withdrew, and Scrooge returned to his labors with an improved opinion of himself. Meanwhile, the fog and the darkness thickened. The ancient tower of a church, whose gruff old bell was always peeping slyly down at Scrooge out of a Gothic window in the wall, became invisible, and struck the hours and quarters as if its teeth were chattering in its frozen head up there. At length, the hour for closing up the counting-house arrived. With an ill will, Scrooge dismounted from his stool and tacitly admitted the fact to the expectant clerk in the tank, who immediately snuffed out his candle and put on his hat. "You'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose."
If quite convenient, sir.
"It is not convenient, and it's not fair. If I were to stop you 1/2 crown for it, you'd think yourself ill-used, I'll be bound. And yet you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work."
It's only once a year, sir.
That's a poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. And yet, I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier the next morning. The clerk promised that he would, and Scrooge walked out with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his comforter dangling below his waist, ran home to Camden Town as hard as he could pelt to play at blind man's bluff. Scrooge took his usual melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy chamber, then went home to bed. Scrooge lived in chambers that had once belonged to his deceased partner, Jacob Marley. Nobody lived in it now but Scrooge. Other rooms were sometimes used as offices. His yard was so dark that night that Scrooge, who knew its every stone, was inclined to grope his way up the walk. Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on Scrooge's door, except that it was very large. It is also a fact that Scrooge had little of what is called fancy about him, as little as any man in all of London. Let it also be borne in mind that Scrooge had not one thought of Jacob Marley since his last mention of his 7 years dead partner that afternoon. Knowing all this, let any man explain to me that Scrooge, having his key in the lock, staring at the knocker, saw not a knocker, but Marley's face. The face had a dismal light about it, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. It was not angry or ferocious, but looked as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned upon its ghostly forehead. Its hair was curiously stirred, as if by breath or hot air. Its eyes, though wide open, sat perfectly motionless. As Scrooge stared fixedly at the phenomena, it was a knocker again. Scrooge was startled, to say the least, yet he managed to put his hand upon the key he had relinquished, walk into his house, and light a candle. Scrooge crept up his stairway, carrying not a button for the darkness. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But as he closed his chamber door, he locked himself in, double locked himself in, which was not his custom. Thus secured against surprise, he slipped on his gown, cap, and slippers, and he sat near the old fireplace to consume a small bowl of gruel he had set aside for himself. Well, looking about his room, Scrooge's glance happened to rest upon a tiny bell above the doorway. It was to his great horror and astonishment that the bell began to ring, and soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house. This might have lasted half a minute, or a minute, but it seemed an hour. The bells ceased as they had begun together. The ringing of the bells was succeeded by a deep, clanking noise down below, as if someone were dragging a heavy chain. The cellar door flew open with a booming sound. Then the clanking grew much louder, and louder still. Soon it could be heard on the floors below. Yes! And coming straight towards Scrooge's door. It's humbug still! I will not believe it! His color changed, though, when without warning or pause, it came on through the heavy door and passed before Scrooge's eyes. The same face, the very same. Marley, in his pigtails, usual waistcoat, tights, and boots. He wore a chain draped about his middle. It was long and wound about him like a tail, and it was made, the Scrooge observed it closely, of hash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, beads, and heavy purses wrought in steel. His body was so transparent that Scrooge, looking through his waistcoat, could see the two buttons on his coat behind. Scrooge had often heard it said that Marley had no bowels, but he had never believed it until now. Who are you?
Ask me who I was.
You're particular for the shade. All right, who were you then?
In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley.
What do you want from me?
Much.
Can you sit down?
I can.
Well, do it then. Marley took a seat across from Scrooge near the old fireplace. Scrooge wondered that a ghost so transparent might find itself capable of taking a seat. But the ghost did it, as if he were quite used to it.
You don't believe in me?
I don't.
What evidence of my reality would you have beyond your own senses?
I don't know.
Why do you doubt your senses?
Because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach can make them cheat. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are. Mercy, dreadful apparition!
None of the will mind. You believe in me or not?
I do. I must. But why do spirits walk the earth? And why do you trouble me?
It is required of every man that the spirit within him should work abroad among his fellow man. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to after death. It is doomed to wander far and wide and witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth, and turn to happiness.
But you were a good man of business, Jacob.
Business! Mankind was my business. Charity, mercy, and forbearance were my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business.
You are chained, Jacob. Tell me why.
I wear the chain I forged in life. I made it link by link and yard by yard. Is its pattern so strange to you? Or would you know the length of the strong coil you bear yourself? It was full, heavy, and as long as this 7 Christmas Eves ago. Oh, you have labored on it since. It is a ponderous chain.
Please, speak comfort to me, Jacob.
I have none to give. I come here tonight to warn you that you have a chance of escaping my fate. Tonight, you will be visited by 3 ghosts.
Is that the chance that you mentioned, dear Jacob?
It is.
In that case, I think I'll...
Without their visits, you cannot hope to short the path which I have tread. Expect the thirst when the bell tolls 1. Look to me no more, Ebenezer. Look, that you may remember what has passed between us.
Within a moment's time, the spectre had vanished. The room was as before. Scrooge examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was as he locked it. The the bolts were undisturbed. So he said, "Bah, ghost, a lot of humbug, that's all that it is." And, being much in need of repose, he went straight to bed and fell asleep upon the instant.
Bong.
Scrooge was awakened by the curtains of his bed being slowly drawn open. He looked up, and there before him was the first of the ghostly visitors. It was a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man, viewed through some supernatural medium which gave it the appearance of having receded from view and being diminished to a child's proportions. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white, as if by age. Yet the face had not a wrinkle on it, and the most tender bloom of youth was on the skin. It wore a tunic of the purest white. And the strangest thing about it was a bright, clear jet of light which sprung from the crown of its head. It also held, under its arm, a great extinguisher for a cap. "Are you the spirit whose coming was foretold to me?"
I am.
"Who and what are you?"
I am the ghost of Christmas past.
"Long past?"
No, your past.
"And what business has brought you here?"
Your welfare.
"I can think of no greater welfare than a night of unbroken rest."
Your salvation, then. Rise, take heed, and walk with me.
As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall and stood on an open country road. The darkness and mist of the city had vanished. It was now a clear, cold winter day, with snow upon the ground. Oh, good heavens! I was a boy here!
You recollect the way?
Remember it. I could walk it blindfold. They walked along the road, Scrooge recognizing every gate and post and tree. They left the main road, and soon they approached a mansion of dull red brick. The ghost and Scrooge entered the dwelling and walked down a main hall which led to a door at the back of the corridor. The door opened before them and disclosed a long, bare, melancholy room, made barer still by lines of plain deal forms and desks. At one of these, a lonely boy was reading near a feeble fire. Scrooge sat down upon a form and wept to see his poor forgotten self as he used to be.
You weep for the boy. Why?
He's left to himself for the holidays. He cannot go home. His father holds him a grudge.
And why does his father hold him a grudge?
His mother died giving birth. His birth.
True. And for this his father never forgave him, just as in later years you never forgave your nephew for the death of your sister.
Yes, Spirit. Yes.
Come, let us see another Christmas.
Although they had but a moment left the school behind them, they were already in the busy thoroughfares of the city, where shadowy passengers passed and repassed. It was made plain by the dressing shops that here, too, it was Christmas. The Spirit stopped outside an old warehouse door and asked Scrooge if he knew it. Know it? Was I not apprenticed here? The Spirit and Scrooge went in and beheld an old gentleman in a Welsh wig sitting behind a large desk. Why, it's old Fezziwig! Bless my soul, old Fezziwig alive again!
Yo-ho there, Dick, Ebenezer. Yo-ho, my boys. No more work tonight, Dick. No more work tonight, Ebenezer. Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas, Ebenezer. Let's have the shutters up.
You would never believe how those fellows went at it. They charged into the street with the shutters. 1, 2, 3 had them up in their places. 4, 5, 6 barred them and pinned them. 7, 8, 9, and they came back again, panting like racehorses. Not long afterward, there was a great party with a magnificent feast. Scrooge named each and every guest as they entered. As Scrooge witnessed the party, a great smile beamed upon his face. A smile, I wager, that had found itself a stranger on that face for many a long, cold year. It seemed only a few moments, and the party was over. Scrooge watched his former self leave in a state of absolute Christmas bliss, heaping compliments upon his employer all the way out the door and into the street. The older Scrooge even nodded in agreement with his younger self.
A small matter to make these silly folks so happy. What did old Fezziwig do, after all, but spend a few pounds and dance like a monkey?
No, Spirit, you don't understand. It's not old Fezziwig's money that makes us love him. The happiness he gives us is quite as great as though it had cost a fortune. Just little acts of kindness, that's all.
What's the matter, Scrooge?
Nothing.
Something, I think.
No, it's Just that I should like to have a word with my clerk, Bob Cratchit, now. That's all.
Come, my time goes short, and we must see another Christmas.
Again Scrooge saw himself. He was a man now, in the prime of life. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl in a mourning dress, in whose eyes there were tears.
It matters little to you, very little. Another idol has displaced me.
Belle, whatever do you mean? What idol has displaced you?
A golden one.
Perhaps I have grown much wiser. The pursuit of wealth is the way of the world, but I've not changed toward you.
I've seen your noble aspirations rot away one by one, until, at last, the master passion gains and engrosses you. Our contract is an old one that we make for both poor and content to be so. Tell me, if you were free today, would you seek me out and try to win my hand?
You think I would not, then? Young fool! Tell her that you would. Oh, God in heaven! Tell her that you would.
I would gladly think otherwise if I could. But even if I believed that if you were free yesterday, today, tomorrow, that you would choose a dowerless girl with nothing but herself to give to you to a marriage? No. You now weigh everything by gain. No, I cannot. And therefore, Ebenezer, I release you. Release you with a full heart for the love of him you once were. You may be happy in the life that you have chosen, my love.
She left, and they parted. Spirit, show me no more. Why do you delight in torturing me?
These are but shadows of the things that have been. That they are what they are, do not blame me. We have one shadow more.
No! Begone! Haunt me no longer! Scrooge and the spirit struggled. Scrooge observed the spirit's light was high and bright. He therefore seized the spirit's extinguisher cap, and by a sudden force of action pressed it down upon the ghost's head. The spirit dropped beneath, so that the extinguisher covered its whole form. But though Scrooge pressed the extinguisher down with all his might, he could not hide the light, which stretched out from under it in an unbroken flood upon the ground. Scrooge was conscious of being exhausted, and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness. And further, he was aware that he was back in his own room. Scrooge therefore gave the cap a parting squeeze, in which his hand relaxed, and he had barely time to heel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep. Awaking in the middle of a prodigious snore, and sitting up in bed to collect his thoughts, Scrooge was not in a mood to be informed that the second spirit was about to appear. Nonetheless, Scrooge felt certain that he was awakened for the special purpose of this ghostly meeting. Thus Scrooge prepared himself for anything between a baby and a rhinoceros as the bell tolled the hour.
Dong!
Now, being prepared for anything, he was not, by any means, prepared for nothing. A full half-hour passed, and still no spirit. 15 minutes more, still no spirit. This absence on part of the spirit infested Scrooge with more horror than could have been caused by a dozen ghosts. After several more moments had passed, Scrooge noticed a dazzling light shining through the crack of the door leading to the adjoining room. He determined that the light meant that the spirit was to be found in that chamber. He therefore stood up and marched straight for the door. The moment he placed his hand upon the door, a large, booming voice called out for him.
Come in and know me better, man.
Scrooge obeyed the voice and entered timidly. The room was his own, but it had undergone some strange transformation. The walls and ceiling were so hung with living green that it looked like a perfect grove, from every part of which bright, gleaming berries glistened. The crisp leaves of holly, mistletoe, and ivy reflected back the light as if so many little mirrors had been scattered there. And such a mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney as that dull petrification of a hearth had never known in Scrooge's time or Marley's. The spirit sat in the middle of this. He was a jolly giant, clothed in one simple green robe, girded with white fur. The garment hung so loosely about the figure that its capacious breasts were bare. Its feet were also bare, and on its head it wore no other covering than a holly wreath, set here and there with shining icicles. Its dark brown curls were dark and free as its genial voice, its sparkling eye, and its cheery face. In its hand it held a torch, shaped like Plenty's horn.
I am the ghost of Christmas present. You have never seen the like of me before.
That I have not.
Never walked with one of my brothers?
No, I can't say that I have. Have you many brothers?
Over 1,800.
Tremendous family to provide for.
Take hold of my robe. We have much to see.
In a flash of light, the room and all its bright contents were gone, and they were on the streets. It was Christmas morning. Scrooge and the Spirit walked along and beheld many things. Children caroling, families buying turkeys, and folks making merry everywhere. There seemed to be some peculiar power emanating from the Spirit's torch, for everywhere they went he sprinkled it, making everyone and everything even more merry on this the merriest of days. Perhaps it was the Spirit's good nature, or its sympathy for all poor men, that led him straight to Scrooge's clerk, Bob Cratchit's home. Mrs. Cratchit and her children were all in a rush preparing for Christmas dinner. They had just finished setting the table when Mrs. Cratchit exclaimed,
Look, children, here is your father with Tiny Tim.
Hello, Father. Hello, my dear. Hello, dearest. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Robert. How did our little Tiny Tim behave at church today?
As good as gold. Better. You know, he thinks the strangest things, sitting by himself. He told me that he hoped the people in church saw him today, for it might be pleasant for them to remember on Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see.
The Cratchits, one by one, sat down for the Christmas meal, which was brought about by Mrs. Cratchit and Martha, the eldest of the young Cratchits. However, before the feast started, Bob raised his glass.
I give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of our feast.
Founder of our feast, indeed. I wish I had him here to give him a piece of my mind to a feast on.
Oh, my dear, Christmas Day, the children.
It should be upon Christmas Day that one would drink to the wealth of such an odious man as Mr. Ebenezer. Nevertheless, Robert, I'll drink to his sake, for your sake and the day's, not for his. Merry Christmas to him, that he'll be very merry, I have no doubt.
To Mr.
Mr. Scrooge.
A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears, and God bless us.
God bless us, everyone.
Spirit, tell me if Tiny Tim will live.
I see a vacant chair by the chimney, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved.
No, please, dear Spirit, say that he will be spared.
If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, none other of my race shall find him here. But what then? If he be like to die, he had better do it, and decrease the surplus population.
Scrooge hung his head to hear his own words quoted by the Spirit, and he was overcome with penitence and grief.
Man, if man you be in your heart, not adamant perhaps from now onward, you will hold your tongue until you find out what the surplus population is and where it is. For it may be that in the sight of heaven you are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child.
Scrooge bent before the ghost rebuke, and trembling cast his eyes upon the ground. But he raised them speedily upon hearing a hearty laugh, and it was a great surprise to Scrooge to recognize that laugh as belonging to his own nephew. For they were no longer at the Cratchits, but at Scrooge's nephew's home at the very dinner party that Scrooge had declined to attend the afternoon before.
He said Christmas was a hunk of an he believed it too.
More shame for him, Fred. I hate him.
She meant it, too, with all her heart. She never did anything in halves, did Scrooge's niece. She was very pretty, exceedingly pretty, with a dimpled, surprised-looking capital face and a ripe little mouth that seemed made to be kissed, as no doubt it was, often.
He's a comical fellow, and not so pleasant as he might be. But I'll not say anything against my uncle. I pity him.
Pity for a man with such great wealth?
Topper, my friend, of course. What good does his wealth do him? He does not even make himself merry with it.
Well, I have no patience with him. All these years he's returned your selfless kindness with hatred and contempt.
Come, dear, I won't have it. I'm sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Drew suffers most from his ill whims, himself always, which is why I mean to invite him to our party every year, and I think I shook him today.
Do go on, Fred. Let's have more of your speech-making.
You must not encourage him so, Topper. It's likely he'll go on with his oratory the whole of the night.
I was only going to say that the consequences of his taking a dislike to us and not making merry with us is, as I think, that he loses some pleasant moments, which could do him no harm. I'm sure he loses pleasanter companions than he could find in his own thoughts, either in his moldy old office or his dusty chambers. I mean to give him the same chance every year, whether he likes it or not. He may rail at Christmas till he dies, but he will find me going there year after year in good temper, saying, "Uncle Scrooge, how are you?" A Merry Christmas to the old man. He wouldn't take it from me, but he may have it. Nevertheless, Uncle Scrooge.
Uncle Scrooge! Their evening was filled with laughter, games, and songs. It reminded Scrooge of the grand Christmas parties he himself had once attended. After much time had passed, the spirit informed Scrooge that it would be necessary for them to leave. Scrooge so loved the festivities that he begged to stay, but the spirit ordered him to go, and Scrooge, left with no other option, obeyed. Much they saw, and far they went, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. The spirit stood beside sick beds, and they were cheerful. On foreign lands, and they were close to home. By struggling men, and they were patient in their greater hope. By poverty, and it was rich. In almshouse, hospital, and jail, in misery's every refuge, where vain man, in his little brief authority, had not made fast the door and barred the spirit out. He left his blessing everywhere, and taught Scrooge his precepts. Finally they came to an open place, where Scrooge stared long at the spirit. Spirit, what is that I see crawling under your robe?
Oh, man, look here.
The spirit undid the foldings of its robe to reveal two children, a boy and a girl. They were yellow, meager, wretched, ragged, scowling, wolfish, where graceful youth should have filled their features out and touched them with its freshest tint. A stale and shriveled hand, like that of age, had pinched and twisted them and pulled them into shreds. No change, no degradation, no perversion of humanity in any grade could have produced such monsters as these. Spirits, whose children are these?
They are man's. They cling to me for protection from their fathers. Beware them, Scrooge. This boy is ignorance. This girl is want. Beware them both, but most of all beware this boy, for upon his brow I see that word which is written doom.
But, Spirit, is there no shelter for them?
Are there no workhouses? Are there no prisons?
Scrooge looked about him for the spirit, and saw it not. As the last stroke of 12 ceased to vibrate, Scrooge remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and lifting his eyes, he beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist on the ground towards him. The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached. When it came near him, the very air in which the spirit seemed to move scattered gloom and mystery. It was shrouded in a deep, black garment which concealed its head, its face, its very form. It left nothing visible save one outstretched hand. But for this, it would not have been distinguishable from the night, and could not have been separated from the darkness which surrounded it. Am I in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come? The spirit answered not, but pointed onward with its hand. Will you speak to me? No? Spirit of the future, I fear you more than any specter I have seen. Please, say something. Very well. The night is waning fast. Lead on, spirit. Lead on. The phantom moved away as it had come toward him. Scrooge followed in the shadow of its dress, which bore him up and carried him along. They scarcely seemed to enter the city when the spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen. Observing that the hand of the spirit was pointed toward them, Scrooge advanced and listened to their conversation.
When did he die?
Last night, I believe.
What of? I thought he'd never go.
Neither did he, I wager.
What's he done with his money?
He didn't leave it to me, that's all I know.
It's likely to be a cheap funeral, for upon my word I know nobody who'll go to it.
I'll go, if lunch is provided. But I must be fed or else I'll stay home.
Spirit, what does this conversation have to do with me? Why attach such importance to matters so trivial? Is there no pity for this dead man? Surely someone must feel something for his death. Please, show me that person. The spirit turned, and they left the busy scene and went into an obscure part of town. The ways were foul and narrow. The shops and houses were wretched. The people half-naked, drunken, slipshod, ugly. Alleys and archways disgorged their offenses of smell and dirt and life upon the straggling streets. The whole quarter reeked with crime, with filth, and with misery. Far in this din of infamous resort, there was a low-browed beetling shop where iron, old rags, bottles, bones, and greasy offal were bought. Secrets that few would like to scrutinize were bred and hidden in the mountains of unseemly rags, masses of corrupted fat, and sepulchres of bones. Sitting in among the wares was a gray-haired old rascal nearly 70 years of age, who smoked his pipe in all the calm luxury of retirement. An old woman, bent over by years of hard labor, entered the room and threw a bundle on the floor.
Undo my bundle, Joe.
Joe went down on his knees for the greater convenience of opening it, and having unfastened a great many knots, dragged out a large and heavy roll of some dark stuff.
This is his curtains, Miss Dilber?
Whose else do you think?
You don't mean to say you took 'em down, rings and all, with him lying there?
Why not? It was the loss of a few things, not a dead man, I suppose. Always took care of himself, didn't I?
Madam, you were born to make a fortune, and you will. I always give too much to the ladies. That's why I come to ruin. What else you got?
Thank
It's blankets. Oh, I hope he didn't die of nothing catching.
Scrooge listened to this dialogue in horror. As they sat proud in their spoil, he viewed them with a detestation and disgust which could hardly have been greater had they been obscene demons marketing the corpse itself. I see, I understand. The case of this poor, unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way now. Oh, merciful heaven. But there must be some emotion towards death, besides avarice and greed. Show me some compassion connected with the death of this terrible vision will haunt me forever. The ghost conducted him through streets until they were again at the Cratchit's house. The place was quiet, very quiet. The little Cratchits were as still as statues in one corner. The mother and her daughters were engaged in sewing. Peter, the oldest son, sat staring at the fire. The spirit and Scrooge crept up the stairs into the room above, which was lighted cheerfully and hung with Christmas. There was Bob, sitting in a chair close beside the bed. Bob was crying, staring hard into the face of his dead son. Scrooge was struck with pain at the sight of this, and for the first time in many years, he felt pity for another human being. Spirit, I asked you for compassion, and you have shown me it. Now please, conduct me to my future self. The ghost led Scrooge to a churchyard. It was a worthy place, walled in by houses, overrun by grass and weeds. The growth of vegetation's death. Death, not life. Choked up with too much bearing, was fat with repleted appetite. Indeed, a most worthy place. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed to one. Scrooge advanced toward the grave, quaking with horror. The phantom was exactly as it had been, but Scrooge dreaded that he saw new meaning in its solemn shape. Answer me one thing. Are these the shadows of what must be? Or are they the shadows of what might be only? The ghost stood as immovable as ever. Scrooge stepped toward the stone, trembling as he went. He followed the finger and read his own name. No! Hear me! I am not the man I was! Why show me this if I am past all hope? I will live my life in the past, the present, and the future. I will honor Christmas in my heart and keep it all the year. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone. Scrooge, in his agony, caught the ghostly hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty. Yet the spirit stronger still, repulsed him. Suddenly, and without warning, the spirit's appearance altered. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. And the bedpost was his own. What? I'm in my own room. I'm alive! The spirits have given me another chance, so heaven and the Christmas time be praised. I say to my knees, dear spirit, on my knees. I don't know what to do. I'm as light as a feather. I'm as merry as a schoolboy. I'm as happy as an angel. I'm as giddy as a drunken man. Oh, I don't know what day of the month it is. I don't know how long I've been amongst the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. He was checked in his transport by the church bells, ringing out the lustiest peals he had ever heard. Running to the window, he opened it and yelled to a boy passing nearby. You there, boy! What day is today?
Why, it's Christmas Day, sir.
Oh, it's Christmas Day. I've not missed it. My dear fellow, do you know of the poulterer in the next street but one?
I should hope so, sir.
An intelligent boy. A remarkable boy. Go and bring the poulterer with the prize turkey so that I may buy it.
What? The one as big as me?
Yes, that's it, my buck. Go and bring the poulterer here with it, and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes, and I'll give you half a crown.
Blimey!
The boy was off like a shot, and Scrooge, quite satisfied, dressed himself and ran into the street to await his turkey. Oh, how wonderful. I'll send it to Bob Cratchit. He shan't know who sent it. By heaven, it'll be a wonderful Christmas in the Cratchit house. Finally, the turkey arrived. Oh, he was a bird. He never could have stood on his legs, this turkey. He would have been snapped off in a moment like sticks of sealing wax. Why, it's impossible to carry that to Camden Town. My good man, you'll need a cab. The chuckle with which he said this, and the chuckle with which he paid for the turkey, and the chuckle with which he paid for the cab, and the chuckle with which he paid the boy, were only to be exceeded by the chuckle with which he sat down breathless on his porch and chuckled till he cried. At long last, he got out into the street. He had not gone far, however, when he ran into the portly gentleman who had visited his office the day before. Gentlemen, Merry Christmas.
Mr. Scrooge?
That is my name. I fear it may not be pleasant with you. Please, allow me to beg your pardon and to offer you...
Mr. Scrooge, I don't know what to say. Such generosity.
Say nothing. There are a great many back payments in it, I assure you.
Merry Christmas, sir.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you, and a Merry Christmas to you as well, my fine fellows. He went to church and he walked the streets. He watched the people hurrying to and fro. He patted children on the head and questioned beggars. Scrooge found that everything could yield him pleasure. In the afternoon, he turned his steps toward his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock, but at last he made a mad dash and did it.
Who's there?
It's I. It's your Uncle Scrooge. I've come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred? Let him in. It's a mercy he didn't shake his arm off.
Uncle, thank God you're here. I have always hoped that one day you would come.
Fred, can you forgive me for the wrongs I've done you?
Uncle, there's nothing to forgive. Come in. I want you to meet my wife.
He was at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be more wonderful. Everything was exactly as he had seen it the evening before with the spirit. Wonderful games, wonderful party, wonderful happiness. Oh, but he was early at the office the next day. Yes, he was early there. If he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming in late. And he did. Oh, yes, he did. The clock struck 9. No Bob. 15:15. No Bob. He was a fool, 18 minutes behind his time. Finally, Bob dashed in. His hat was off before he opened the door, his comforter too. He was on the stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pin as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock. Mr. Cratchit! What do you mean by coming in this time of day?
I'm behind in my time, sir. I was making rather merry yesterday. It's happened again.
Let me tell you, my friend, I'm not going to stand this sort of thing any longer, and therefore you leave me no alternative but to double your salary.
Double my salary? Sir!
Yes, Bob, a Merry Christmas to you. A merrier Christmas than I have given you in a long time. I'll raise your salary for a start, and I'll endeavor to help your struggling family, if you'll let me. We'll talk the details over later with a hot bowl of smoking bishop. Meanwhile, it's cold in here. Make up the fires, my good man. Yes, go and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit. Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. He became as good a master, as good a friend, and as good a man as the good old city ever knew. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he became a second father. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. Scrooge had no further intercourse with the spirits, and it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well. And if any man alive possesses the knowledge, may that be said of us and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone.